to Booking the Wrestler Impact Edition Series 2. This is episode 2 of the series of Impact Wrestling being booked. I know that sounds a little weird, like, dude, why don't you just go back to the edition? Well, I did 8 episodes of the Impact Edition. One of them is final, and I want to do something different. Deal with it. Okay, I got an interesting for you. An interesting one. I'm kind of excited with this one because it just came out of nowhere. I was thinking, what can I say about Ziggy Dice and Johnny Swinger? Now, I was originally just going to be about them, but then I'm thinking, wait a minute, wait. Let me think about this for a minute. Yes, Ziggy Dice has this weird old vibe of the 80s. You know Johnny Swinger is stuck in the 80s and the 90s. But then I thought, what can I add to that? Who can I add to it? Who is the most outlandish back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000? Who is the most outlandish now that kind of gives you a feel of the past that is beyond stupid, silly, but then still can get it done in the ring? And I found 2 people and a manager to go with Ziggy Dice and Johnny Swinger. And this is what I'm thinking. Okay, this is recent times, 2021. We're in December. We're going from 2021 into 2022. We're going to be bringing people in from the outside of Impact in this Booking the Wrestler. Now, we got Ziggy Dice. He's working with VSK and the Brian Myers, and eventually Brian gets sick of him. VSK loses several matches because of Ziggy Dice being the way it was. If you've seen the last episode where he started pulling out a little bit of confetti from his mouth, that shows he can do a little bit of magic. And eventually got himself in trouble, and he's been told, you're done. I don't want nothing to do with you. And that is Brian Myers. He said, I'm done. And Ziggy says, why are you doing this? And then VSK hits him in the face. And then they have a feud where he loses flat out. He get his butt whooped. I'm saying it like that on purpose because I want to do a little bit of nostalgia, ladies and gentlemen. Well, he gets butt whooped at least for 2 months. He's trying to get it done. He gets a partner or 2, but none of them really could help him. And he's down in the dumps by the last match he had within those 2 months. And he's sitting there. He doesn't know what to do with himself. And he decides while he's sitting there, I'm just going to read something. And he pulls out of his bag because he's sitting in the back and catering. And he pulls out a magazine from his collection that he's got from the 80s and 90s, and he's reading it. And then as Hernandaddy and Johnny Swinger's walking by him, Hernandaddy says, look at that old stuff right there. Look, what the hell are you reading? He says, what? What are you reading there? Is that a muscle magazine from the 90s? And Hernandaddy's laughing at him. But then Johnny Swinger goes, I remember that one. I was supposed to be in there, but that Hammernager on front took my spot. And he says, what? Really? I actually heard a wrestler, and this is Ziggy Dice, because he is a connoisseur of old wrestling and some 80s and 90s trivia and paraphernalia. And he says, actually I heard that a wrestler did have the option of being on the cover of this particular one. But the ones who ran the expose, the editor said, nah, I ain't gonna let him be in there because he lost his match to become champion of the promotion he was in. He said, what? That was not my fault. I got cheated. And he said the same thing in the article here, that he complained that he got cheated, but in fact he didn't get cheated. He says, what? Give me that. And he looks on the page. This is false advertising. This is false. I'm going to sue. He says, and this is Hernandad. He says, Swinger, how can you sue over 20 years ago? I don't care. I'm going to sue. And then from there, Ziggy Dice was impressed with Johnny Swinger because he saw how passionate he was about the past, about his moment he could have shined. And after that, they just started talking. So for the next month, you see Ziggy with Johnny Swinger talking. Hernandaddy's doing what he needs to do. At this time, he's not working with LAX like in the previous story that I did. So pretty much, he clearly is really getting into him. And Ziggy's getting into Johnny. They're both going back and forth. And Hernandaddy is going like, what are you two doing? You should be going out there trying to make some money. You guys got no damn money. And Ziggy says, I have more fun reading some old stuff like from the Transformers '86. It broke my damn heart as a kid. And you see Johnny Swinger started to cry because he said, Ziggy Daddy, I couldn't stand it when Optimus Prime was killed. Oh my God. No. You see them interacting in nostalgia. Eventually, at this point, going into 2 months, they start tagging together, but they're not really getting anywhere. They're not winning any matches. They're getting their butts kicked. And VSK, along with Brian Myers, is one of those teams that went at and started laughing at him. And that is Ziggy Dice. He said, look at this. You haven't learned a damn thing for almost 4 months ago when I whooped your ass. And VSK, my protege, whooped your ass. You're still the same stupid Ziggy Dice. Doing magic, thinking about more of the past. You're stupid. You need to think of the future. You need to see where you're going, not where you've been. And Johnny Swinger said, for one moment, he became really serious. One moment. He steps up to Brian Myers, takes off his glasses. He says, with no attitude, he says, who the hell do you think you are? If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be where you are today. Yeah, I like to think of the past. I love the past. But the past gives you something you don't got now. And Brian Myers says, what? A lot of nostalgia? No. Intelligence. Because we had to be more smarter back then than you idiots. You ham and eggers. You know why? Because at least we don't need some stupid app on a damn phone to be able to come up with a line that can be interesting. We had to use our brain to actually come up with a good line to mess with you. I may be a bit nostalgic, but at least I don't need a damn phone. And because Brian Myers at that time was using an app to try and figure out some really good zinger lines, I don't need a damn phone to use my brain. It may not be perfect, but at least I'm here. Puts his glasses on, grabs Ziggy, and they walk off. After that, Brian Myers, the next segment, whoop the ass of a Johnny Swinger, whoop the ass of a Ziggy Dice. And they do that for 2 weeks straight. And they got sick of it. Brian Myers and VSK got over them so well. They were just angry. Flat out angry. And they didn't know what to do. Ziggy saying, we got to get back at them. He says, how are we going to do that, Zig Daddy? I just don't know. And weirdly enough, someone walks up to both of them and says, do you two know how to be able to think? Do you know how to able to wrestle? Guess what? And they zoom up to the guy's face, and guess who it is? It's Jim Cornette. Not an ordinary Jim Cornette like today. He is the old Jim Cornette with the tennis racket, saying, if you need someone to teach you to be able to win, I am here for you. And they're looking at him like, oh. They had a big light bulb go off of their head. One of the best managers in the late 80s, early 90s into the 2000s, they realized it. And they said, and this is Ziggy. He says, please be our manager. Please give us your knowledge. And Johnny Swinger is saying, no, we're not working with this ham and egg. And he says, really? You don't want to work with me? When we were in ECW, now I don't remember if Johnny Swinger was in ECW or not, or Jim Cornette. I believe he was. Yeah, Jim Cornette was in ECW at one point. He blew out his knees in ECW. But don't know if Johnny Swinger was in ECW. I believe he was. But the point is, Disco Inferno, he says, really, Disco Inferno? You think I've forgotten you? You could have won the damn championship if you had listened to me back then. And then Ziggy said, oh my gosh, were you the manager of Johnny? He says, of course I was, until he pissed me off and I left. And then he lost his chance at the ECW title. And I'm not saying that's real. This is just story, guys. This is not real. Okay? But in this storyline, he had a chance to become ECW champion. But it didn't happen because he pissed off Jim Cornette, who was pushing him at the time. So, Johnny said, screw this. I'm not working. When he says, well, it's your loss. You're never going to gain anything. And he walks off. And Ziggy Dice says, these two will come together. He actually breaks the fourth wall. This is what he does. He's put his head down. And then he lifts his head up and looks at the camera, stands up and holds the camera in his hand. He says, these two will get together. I guarantee it. Sorry about that. He literally broke the fourth wall. Yes, of course, they know they got a camera in their face. But he grabs the camera, he pulls it forward and says, I'm going to make this work. These guys must come together. And he spends the next month trying to bring them together, making it as nostalgic as possible. And only, just like Paulie always said, accentuate the positives, hide the negatives. He made sure the problems they had together was not the focus when he brought them together. He got them to be in the same room, looking at old footage of themselves, and he made sure he kept out the bad stuff, which made them nostalgic. Then he took them to a bar that was known at the place they're at, like in Boston. He took them to the oldest bar in Boston. It has not changed in over a century. And they both weren't in that bar. And they filmed in there. And they pretty much were getting drunk and enjoying it. Then he did something they wouldn't expect. He said, guys, I got a gift for you guys that's going to make you two go nuts. And he says, what, Ziggy? And what, Zig Daddy? He takes them around the corner and presents them into a car. A Countach. He managed to get himself a rented, and he says it to them, this is rented. I managed to pull a couple of strings with a cousin of mine who works on one of the best, very prestige car lots in the world for antique and vintage cars. And he managed to get himself a Countach to rent for the day. And he says, listen to me. You guys can go and drive around this car. You can drive around the Countach. And this is your chance to truly have a perfect moment. I want this for you because you guys are my friends. And he gives the keys to Jim Cornette. And Jim jumps into the car. Johnny jumps in the car. And they drive off with that bitch. They drive the entire day. And it's filmed. Now, of course, they wanted to make it... Let's make this clear. This is Impact Wrestling. And understand, when it comes to a car like that, an Alfa Romeo, like one of the older ones in the 80s, they're worth hundreds of thousands to $1 million. To a Lamborghini, particularly when it comes to the Countach, those suckers are worth $2 to $3 million in great condition. And in this case, this car was beautiful and was at least $3 million, this Countach. And they made sure, and let's be honest, this is Impact, I want to make sure, the car was in a parking lot, driving slowly in Boston. And I'm doing the Boston attitude and the accent. They're in Boston. This is all being done in Boston. And they go outside the parking lot, circle around slowly. They're not flooring it, but they make it look fast because they speed up the film, the camera. They make it look like they're going, and that's just to protect them because, let's be honest, this is still Impact Wrestling. I'm not going to give them that much leeway. I can't, guys. They made it look like they were driving around real fast. And everyone could see that it's fake. And they're driving maybe 20 miles an hour, maybe near 30. They're not doing 100 in the parking lot. And next to doing some wheel spins beforehand to make it look good, it's slow and everyone knows. But it's still done well enough that you laugh and you see them come out of the car in slow motion. You see Jim Cornette with his racket. You see Johnny Swinger standing tall, looking just like he's from Miami Vice. They're walking away from the Countach, and pretty much Ziggy Dice is going, now those look like guys who are meant for success. And he's all up in the camera like this. He breaks the fourth wall again. But when this is all said and done, Cornette says, you know what? Whatever happened before, let's let this go. Let's make a real tag team. And Ziggy Dice says, please, let's do it. And the one that had to agree was Johnny. And Johnny says, you know what? And he literally drops the attitude of the Johnny Swinger for one moment again. And he says, and he puts his hand on Jim. He says, look, I can act silly all I want, but I really want gold. I want to be respected. I love doing the Hernan Daddy. I love doing the Ziggy Daddy. I love doing the Cornette Daddy. I love acting out, but I want gold. I want it. Will you help me? And that's when they get started. And that is when they finally are the Nostalgia Kings. It's the best name I can come up with, guys. I couldn't think of anything else. The Nostalgia Kings. They're the king of nostalgia. And they're bringing back the 80s. They rent a car. They rent a GTI. I forgot what the name of it is. I can't remember. A Cooper Mini GTI. One of the most famous cars that was for rally. They're driving a vintage one that's like $20,000. Someone managed to give it to them. And they're driving it around. Anytime when they're supposed to come to Impact, the Nostalgia Kings come out in a mini GTI, that's type of style one that was done for rally, and they step out of the car looking nostalgic, looking cool, looking sleek. And they're saying, we're going to be the ones that's going to be the new Impact champions. And as they go through 5 months of beating, now at this time, they still have FinJuice, they have the Good Brothers, they still have at this time the Bullet Club. They also at this time are having, you know what, throw in the Fixers from NWA, because there's a couple of people from NWA that's coming over. Well, one is coming over from NWA along with the Fixers. So that's 4. Also, Reno Scum comes back. That's 5. They got 5 teams along with DK. That makes 6. So there are 7 teams on Impact at this time. 2 of them are feuding. The rest are trying to get the tag titles. And at this point, you got Hernandez teaming up at this point with Black Tyru. Because at the moment of Decay, you got Demon on there, which kind of helps a little bit of Johnny Swinger in real storyline that he had before when he couldn't stand the Demon. But you get my point. There are now 8 teams on Impact Wrestling. Not 2, 3, or 4. You got 8, including the Nostalgia Kings of Johnny Swinger and the Ziggy Dice, baby. But here's where it gets interesting. After 5 months, they're going up against the Good Brothers with Jim Cornette by their side. They do win the damn titles. Finally, they win their damn titles. But the Nostalgia Kings want more. But they feel, at this point, going after the world title or the X Division title is not really what they really want. But they believe that their team should be a part of it. And they're thinking, wait a minute. If we go after the X Division, we're going to get slaughtered. There's too many people on there. We're not X Division stars. And then Jim says, along with that, you two, no matter how much I love you, and you've done incredible work. You beat everybody, but we are talking about the world title. Neither one of you got that ability. You just don't got it. And it was Johnny who came up with the idea. He says, Jim Daddy, why are we doing this? Why are we getting upset about something we know we can't get? Let's try and make sure the ones who do get it are with us. Why don't we find people that we know that are like us, get them, bring them into the Nostalgia Kings, and expand from a team to a faction, and let's whoop ass. And he says, Johnny, that is the smartest move you've ever come up with, the best idea. So they start looking, and they notice their first one that'll be great for the world title. Behemoth of a man, a nostalgic man, a romantic man, a refined man. Leonard D. I gotta bring in Leonard D. At this moment, Leonard D, with his music that sounds like something that came from an old porn movie. Or some old 80s lounge music. Dun 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 dun. That is what you hear from Leonard D. Not Larry with AC Romero. This is Leonard D, who still got his wonderful perfume, or in his case, cologne, that basically makes him feel so musk, so manly, so dominant. And it's pretty much Ziggy Dice approaches him and says, dude, Why don't you join us? Do you want to be world champion? He says, what? You had a chance in a tournament to become world champion, but you lost. Mostly due to the fact of your only weakness. And he says, I have no weakness. Yes, he does. And he grabs it. It's the cologne. He says, you're a nostalgia guy. This, your music, your style of clothes, even your wrestling is nostalgia. You don't need this to be nostalgic. You don't need this to be an old school guy. He puts it down on the table. Come with me. You don't need that to be great. You already are great. So he walks away with him, and they zoom in on the cologne that he always sprayed himself with. Because we all think, well, when Lenny D or Leonard D is with that, he's always Lenny D. But when he doesn't have it, he's Leonard. I mean, when he's not with that, he's Larry. But when he sprays it, he's Leonard. But guess what? He doesn't change back. It's the nostalgia kings to get him to understand that the spray isn't what changes him. It's always been within him. And now, after a few days, he's still the same way. He sticks to it because they convinced him, look, who you are is what always inside you. This damn thing's not making you great. They threw it away because it's the next couple of weeks. You who you are. You don't need that spray to make you nostalgic, makes you great, makes you a throwback to the great golden age of wrestling. You are already there. So guess what? They were right. Because from that moment on, when he accepted that it wasn't the spray that Rosemary sprayed him that made him like in Wrestle House. Wrestle House 2. Wrestle House 2. I think I fried my brain with that. Calm. But with that, for the next 4 months, he beats everybody until he's reaching Bound for Glory. Bound for Glory. And he's going up against, shockingly enough, he's going up against Eddie Edwards, the new hardcore legend that is taking over for a Tommy Dreamer. And he whooped that ass and he becomes world champion. The Nostalgia Kings have now taken 3 of the 4 general titles. 4. But there's still one more. X Division. And they're trying to find someone new, someone you wouldn't expect, someone who has something that tangible, special, that it's not about how high flying he is, how fast and strong he is. It's about his style, about his ideals, his nostalgia for the 80s and 90s. And they found it because another group, just like the Fixers from NWA, comes over to Impact. This guy comes over too. And he's dressed to kill. And he's pimping. He's doing it. He is just looking like a man from the 80s. But it's not who you think. It is not the Pope D'Angelo De Niro. Because he's still in NWA. Black Cheese. Yeah! Black Cheese. A guy who knows how to be slick, who knows how to talk, who also knows how to wrestle. Yes, he's small in stature compared to other X Division stars, but he can wrestle. He'd also use his head. And he comes in looking like not a pimp in the sense of getting a hoe. He's looking like a mafia guy from the 80s. And he says in his story that he is half black, half Sicilian. And he says, what do you want? I'm a black Sicilian. I don't mess around, man. I know what it means to control, to rule, and get what the hell I want. And he doesn't because he gets his ass whooped every time. Until the Nostalgia Kings call him in and says, Black G's, you need this. Come with us. Your true calling is to be nostalgic. You want to be like a Don, don't you? You want to be the Don of Impact Wrestling. Black G's, the Don of the X Division. Think about it. You can be a made man in the X Division. You can have guys by your side in the X Division that will go and do what you want. And he says, let me think about it. And they say, no, you don't think about it because this is your only offer. What do you have? You've been getting your ass kicked and you've been looking like an idiot. And this is Jim Cornette saying this. He said, this is your chance to truly be what you're meant to be. The dawn of Impact Wrestling. Black G's the dawn. Come on. I can even get you 2 guys by your side. And guess who they are? The 2 guys will be simply, well, Caleb with a K is one. And the second one will be easily, the Fuego del Sol. He shows up there. He comes from AEW. So now, Fuego del Sol and Caleb with a K, because he's got removed by Tennille Dashwood and by pretty much every other woman from DK and the Influence, as well as Inspiration. He's got nobody. So, what do we got here? We got him joining the Black Jesus crew, who also tags along with the Nostalgia Kings. The Nostalgia Kings now have not just 1, 2, or 3, 4, they got 6 guys. 2 guys as muscle, which they're not really muscle, but that is for the Black G's, who is in the X Division. You got Leonard D as champ, and you got the tag champs of Ziggy Dice as well as Johnny Swinger, and Jim Cornette is raking it in. They get a huge amount of cash for every time they're on, and he's checking the money. He becomes the money guy, and Black G says, hey Jimmy, did you get the money for this week? He says, oh yeah. And he passes out to G's, he passes out to Swinger, he passes out to Leonard, and he gives maybe a little bit to Fuego as well as Kevin. They say, hey, what about us getting more money? He says, when you win money, you get money. And they say, what do you mean win money? That means win some matches, boys. That's what Black G's tell them. If you win matches, you make more money. Until you win matches, you don't make no money. Now shut up and get me some soda. And that's what they will go off to do. And this is Black G's getting what he wants. So Black G's finally, by Bound for Glory, gets the X Division title. At this time, it was Trey who was holding it, but he gains it. But he doesn't gain it by cheating. He actually gets it because he whoops Trey's ass. So everybody in Nostalgia Kings has a title. Black G's has the X Division with his boys of Fuego del Sol and Caleb with a K. The Nostalgia Kings, the premier tag team, still holding on to the Impact titles for nearly 8 months. 8. They won it, and they've been keeping it, beating everybody. Yeah, they cheat a little bit. Lying, cheating, stealing is not so bad. They're pretty proud of it. But the majority of the time, they do win because they're that good. And the world title belongs to a Leonard D. And the next year, going into 2023, because this is all being done from 2021, 2022, 2023, you got Jim Cornette, and on the first Impact of 2023, he says, welcome to Impact Wrestling, and welcome to the nostalgic Impact, because the Nostalgia Kings are here, and they own it all. And that is my booking Impact Series 2 video. I have no idea it's going to be good. I don't even know if anyone's going to watch it. Lately, not many people watched it. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And by the time this is released, it might be released before Christmas. I am considering doubling these up, so I might have 2 a week. So I'll have some content. So I don't know if you'll enjoy it. But if you do, leave a like, leave a subscribe, and leave a comment what you would do. Do you like my idea of the Nostalgia Kings? Peace.